Working out is simple. You go to the gym, pick things up, put them down, try your hardest, happy days. But there are a few sneaky little misconceptions that have surprisingly big impacts on how you train and the results you get. The worst part is, many of these myths are so mainstream that the majority of people believe them to be true and wind up doing the complete opposite of what's most effective for their goals. In this video, I'll take you through these different myths. We'll discover why they're misleading, and I'll also give you practical tips for each one, so by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to do to get the most out of your workouts. Working out creates micro tears in your muscle that your body rebuilds as bigger muscles.
The more blood you get in it, you're gonna create these micro tears. That's when the nutrients get in the muscle, and that's when it actually grows. You guys take pre-workout?
If this was true, the more damage you create, the more muscle you will grow. Now, when you put it like that, you can probably see the issue. Getting injured creates significant damage, but your muscles don't come back significantly larger. But that's extreme, and life is not lived in the extremes. The more mainstream take on this is that the more muscle damage you can create by pushing yourself in the gym, the better your results. Especially with things like pre-exhaust, drop sets, giant sets, force reps, and other pain-inducing workout intensity techniques. But that's kind of the opposite of what we want for more gains. Every time you go to work out, you are going to stimulate what we will call the gains, also known as muscle protein synthesis. Now, when you first start working out, you're going to see a lot more damage, and that's going to go down over time. It's also when you're going to see the least amount of muscle growth, because most of this muscle protein synthesis or gains is being directed towards repairing this damage instead of building more muscle. Over time, as we see less and less damage, these same gains that are being stimulated can now be directed towards building more muscle, and that is what we see over time. This usually happens after a few weeks on the same muscle building plan, so maybe week 4, 5, 6 and beyond. There will always be some damage when you go to workouts, but the goal should be to minimize it and not maximize it. You want less damage and fatigue for the same amount, if not more, stimulus for muscle building. Think of your workouts as your opportunity to turn on this light. So as you do your warm-up sets, you've turned on the light, but the dimmer switch is down low, because since it's a warm-up, you don't need to use all of your muscles and it's not going to cause much growth. But as you get into your work sets and those truly challenging 5 or 6 reps towards the end of a work set, we turn that dimmer switch up and we can see more gains. This is when you're getting the highest stimulus. In nerdy terms, this is when your body's activated all the high threshold motor units to lift the weight. Once you've done this, any more work isn't going to turn the light on anymore, because we've already maxed it out. If you did a drop set now, or more force reps, or partial reps, or a giant set, or a superset, you'll get more damage, which you have to recover from, which will take away from your gains. This is why it's possible to build muscle using literally one single set. I think we need more than one set and one exercise for a muscle group, because we have different regions like the upper versus lower chest, or the upper back like your traps and rhomboids versus your lats. But your primary goal isn't to create more damage, it's to accumulate hard sets using maximum effort. So here's how it might look for something like back. To start, we'll do a vertical pulling exercise like a pull-up. We'll do 2 sets of around 6 to 12 reps. Next, we'll go into something that's a horizontal pull, like maybe a cable row or a barbell row, whatever you feel like. Again, we'll do 2 sets of around 6 to 12 reps. If you're more advanced, you might add in another exercise, but that there covers most of your bases. I choose 2 sets per exercise instead of 1, just in case, because I know we've all done this before, where we've done a hard set of 6 to 10 reps where you think to yourself, yes, I turned on that light bulb, but then your gym crush comes in and sits on the bench next to you, and somehow, magically, you take that exact same weight and pull out 20 reps on it instead. Easy. There's also another reason why I do more than 1 set, which we'll come back to in our final myth. You want to do the same exercises again and again and again each week, because mixing it up all the time also means more damage. Over time, you should build up a repository of exercises that work really well for you, that feel good, and that you enjoy. You stick with them and don't mix them up just for the sake of it. Myth number 2, slow is better.
Control, 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 weight, rack.
I think just about every lifter goes through the slow phase. Intentionally going slower on either lifting or the lowering portions of an exercise is probably not doing what we thought it was. If you can deliberately slow down an exercise during the lifting portion, that tells me the weight is too easy for you. And if it's easy for you, the lights are turned on, but that dimmer switch is turned way down. Eventually you will get tired and it will become challenging, and this dimmer switch here will start to turn up. But you've just done all those earlier slow tiring reps just to tire yourself out for these last reps. Meanwhile, you could have just lifted at a regular pace and saved yourself a lot of time and energy. Going slow is good to work around pain or injuries, or if you don't have a lot of weight available because you're traveling in a hotel gym with limited equipment, or if it feels good for you personally on a particular movement. But as a blanket technique, it's not essential. Now, what about the lowering portion? The mainstream idea is that your body is stronger on the lowering or eccentric portion, and this is more anabolic, so you should spend more time there. There have been some studies showing more gains on the eccentric, but this only happens if you're able to overload this lowering portion significantly. In terms of speed, we do have a lot of good research comparing slower to faster eccentrics, showing no significant difference. Dr. Mike Israetel is probably best known for his use of slow, controlled movements, with many of his workout videos showing 5 or 6 second lowerings with an intentional pause. But if you look at how he actually lifts, it's a very different story. Here's what he had to say about it.
Once I have an eccentric pace, there's great SFR, and I'm used to it, then I'm just locked in.
And I think that's important, isn't it? Because a lot of people will see like maybe me lifting very slow,
And
or you lifting fast, and be like, hang on, what's the right one tempo? But it should be, well, we're trying to find the goal of SFR,
Yes.
not 8 seconds or not 2 seconds.
Right, and there's no wrong answers. Could be 8, could be 2, could be anything between.
Yeah.
If you want to go slower on a certain exercise to help you learn a movement or display more consistent technique rep to rep, go for it. I do this a lot, but as a general rule, you're not missing out on any gains if you follow a more natural tempo to your lifts. If anything, I find if I go slow, I wind up spending so much mental effort focusing on the speed that I can't focus on what really matters, which is pushing hard. I think this is where many people fall into this trap of trying to dial in perfect technique.
Those knees come in, all of a sudden, this is not supporting, and a lot of that force is gonna go somewhere, and oftentimes to the low back.
I would love to tell you that there is such thing as perfect technique that you can hyperanalyze and dial in. One that keeps you free from injuries, allows you to lift for the rest of your life and make endless gains. And most importantly, more gains than if you had less than perfect technique. But I'm sorry folks, it doesn't exist. Katrina, Sherelle and myself are all roughly the same height, but we have surprisingly different structures. Katrina's got femurs longer than most people's relationships, and while Sherelle has a more balanced structure, she also has the ankle mobility of concrete. Jackson and I are nearly the same height sitting down, but my long torso can't keep up with his long legs once we're standing. Perfect technique isn't one textbook standard that applies to everyone. It's a broad spectrum of possibilities that you have to individualize to your body based on a few key principles. Number 1, what muscles do you want to target? Number 2, what setup lets you take those muscles through a large range of motion? Number 3, what setup reduces strain elsewhere so the target area is most likely to fatigue first? Number 4, what allows for efficiency in movement and consistency rep to rep? If Katrina uses the same stance and higher bar position as me, she ends up folding forwards. This puts more strain on the lower back and less on her quads. If she tried to get more upright, she'd topple over backwards. But if she took a front squat technique, elevated her heels and took a slightly wider stance, she'd be able to squat more upright, reducing strain on lower back and increasing the strain on her quads. Whatever the exercise, you need to identify your target and make the exercise fit you and not the other way around. You want a squat pattern, whether you do it with a high bar, low bar, front squat, Zercher, Smith machine, pendulum, hack squat, split squat, it's completely up to you. Now the same thing applies to the actual lifting technique itself. Some people like to grip and rip their deadlifts or dive bomb their squats and move with a lot of body English. Some like to take their time and move a little bit slower. There's no right or wrong, only right or wrong for you. And as much as certain techniques may look dangerous, the only truly dangerous position is the one you're not prepared for. We can't avoid many of these movements in everyday life, so instead of hyperfixating on perfect technique and being scared of certain movements, train your body with smart, patient progressions to build total body resilience. Cardio kills your gains.
Conditioning work with your strength work is going to kill your gains, and I can prove that to you.
You've probably seen an image like this at some point in your life. The main message being cardio and conditioning work will kill your gains. This myth started decades ago when we oversimplified and categorized strength training as anabolic and cardio as catabolic. This became known as the interference effect, where the catabolic signals that your body gets from doing cardio will interfere with the muscle building signals from strength training and they'll cancel each other out. More modern research has shown that while the interference effect does technically exist, the impacts it has on your body are largely overblown. Cardio isn't about muscle building or fat loss. It's about strengthening and improving the function of your heart, lungs, and blood vessels. This means better recovery and performance overall. You'll feel good, you'll push hard in the gym and live a healthier life. But if you were concerned about losing some gains from doing cardio, here's 3 things you can do to cover your bases. First, do your cardio away from lifting sessions, either on a separate day or a separate workout. I personally try to do it on separate days, but if I can't, I'll aim to do it after my lifting workout so it doesn't impact my performance. I personally do a variety of running, kettlebells, skipping, and the bike, but if I want to maximize gains, I try to use lower impact options as much as possible, like the bike or the elliptical, over skipping or running to minimize the extra stress on my body. Lastly, I'd keep a close eye on my lifting performances long term, and if I saw things going down or stalling out, it might be a sign that I need to change how I'm doing my cardio, as it might be interfering with my overall recovery for my main priority. A simple pen and paper logbook works great, but I made a logbook right in my Gambaru app, along with all my bodybuilding programs and a diverse range of plans for mobility, cardio, and hybrid coaches to take out a lot of the guesswork for you. You just show up, pick a plan, and start training. I'll leave a link for you below so you can try it out. Everybody is confused by progressive overload.
Train harder than last time. Progressive overload.
The myth is that you must add weight or reps every time you work out if you want to see gains. And if you can't, you're failing to overload and you won't make progress. But that's not how this works. Progressive overload isn't something you force every session, it's what happens as your body builds muscle and adapts to your training. You don't add more weight or reps to build more muscle, it's when you build more muscle, you'll be able to add more weight. It's a subtle but important difference. The standard advice leaves you frustrated or thinking you're going backwards when you can't lift more every week, while the other sets realistic expectations and promotes patience in your training. It might be several weeks before you're able to see any meaningful progress or extra reps or pounds on the bar, even if you're doing everything right. You're not broken if your progress seems slow. It's usually the case that the progress is so small that you can't see it in a meaningful way in your workouts each week. So week 1, you do a really hard set, say a 500 kilogram lateral raise for 10 reps, and that gives you 100% of the gains. If you did the exact same thing on week 2, you won't get 0 gains, you might get 90 or 95% gains instead. You could probably go several weeks on the same weights and reps and still make progress. It'll be a little less each time, but it's still there. Now, to come back to our very first myth at the start of this video, this is another reason why I recommend doing more than 1 set to cover your bases. And this is also why I recommend the double progression method and using rep ranges in your training. Give yourself a range of around 6 to 12 reps. Start at 6 reps on an exercise and try to add a rep each time you work out. Eventually, you'll be able to get 12 reps. Then you increase the weight by 1 increment and go back down to 6, rinse and repeat. You're probably already doing this, but the most important takeaway is don't beat yourself up if you can't add something each week. You're not going backwards, you don't need to switch programs or change anything at all. Just embrace the monotony, find joy in the routine of showing up without the immediate gratification, and slog on tenaciously through those difficult times. Keep going.